Q&A right now to come down to the front of the theater. And I also want to point out, this guy's not part of the Q&A, but Toby, who was the music supervisor, I don't know how the fuck he got the rights to that much music into this film with not a lot of money, but hats off to you for that, Toby. Apparently, though, he didn't get the rights to play them all through the credits. That was an official fee. Gibby's whispering in my ear right now. He's wondering if there's any woman who would like to come up here and take her top off. Apparently, that's the one thing that's missing from rock and roll nowadays. Anybody have a question? If you have a question, I'd like to just invite you guys to make a little line down here so we can hand the microphone to people with questions. Nobody has questions, right? I guess the movie answered every question in the film.
Yeah.
When did it close?
I love you now.
What year did it close?
Well, who's your question for?
Everyone.
Randy, what year did it close? Shit.
I stopped in '96. It went on until about 2001. And like the one kid said in the film, they started doing some local bands. It was just 1 month. If that, excuse me. Yeah, right in the microphone. So one of Gibby songs, actually.
Yeah.
Snap. That's what 2001, but I left '96. It's great to see a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time. Thank you all for coming to New York. Can I say something?
Yeah.
There's a man down there, I hope he's still here, maybe he left with Matt Pinfield. He had a Dickie shirt on. But it was a Dickie shirt I made. I used to book tours for bands too. I wasn't busy enough that I would actually book tours for bands and then go out and tour manage them. But there was a guy with a Dickie shirt, but I made the shirt.
One of the originals, really?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, I wish I could have gotten that.
I want to remind all you guys when you talk, try to keep the microphone right up against your mouth. So everybody... Like this? Yes, exactly like that. Since nobody else has a question, I have one I'm going to ask next. The Butthole Surfers show kind of ended with just, oh, and then you pulled the power after an hour and 45 minutes. What the fuck happened after that?
Wow, the crazy thing was we were accused of staying in the dressing room, refusing to leave the dressing room. And what I'd like to reveal now is that the club had accidentally overpaid us $1,000 that night. And we were waiting for a police escort for fear that he would find out that we had been overpaid and kick our ass.
Fair enough.
But what I think is interesting about it is that these guys, like, they were all fine with, like, getting your head scrambled in the bathroom. You saw pictures that they lovingly, like, the kids getting dragged out by their neck, all that shit. But then they see one naked woman.
I saw laws. That's what I saw.
So there's no law against kicking somebody's ass, but there is a law against exposing a breast.
It was just a weird night. It was a weird night because I worked with Gibby about 4 or 5 times before that. One time they played with the Replacements. Do you even remember playing with the Replacements?
Okay. Now you've opened up that sore. We pulled up to the club at like 5:30 in the afternoon for a sound check, and then on the marquee of the club, it said, "Tonight, the Replacements." So as we pulled up, we realized that we had been replaced by the Replacements. And the only thing that's fuzzy about that night is as to why we were replaced by the Replacements. And I will disagree with what he's about to say.
Well, you were nomads. You guys were nomads. You had no telephone, you had no management, nothing. All you had was Terry, and he could never get in touch with you. Terry Tolkien, right?
Oh, awesome. Way to whip Terry up.
And we didn't know if you were going to show up or not. We didn't hear from you for about 6 weeks, so I had a chance to put the Replacements. I wasn't going to turn it down. It turned out that the Replacements and the Buttholes played together for like 3 hours, 5 hours.
It was a great show. It was a great show. City Gardens. Fuck yeah.
I have a question for John
Yeah.
Joseph too. Noted vegan triathlete, author of Meat is for Pussies, also big proponent of punk rock and all ages shows. John, I want to know how you feel about what Randy had to do to keep shows all ages was install a hot dog machine.
As HR would say, fire burn. But I actually have a comment about Randy and that type of promoter from back in the day. I mean, I've been touring since '81. I actually worked with the Abrams the night they played at your show. And what was the first year Cro-Mags played at your club? Do you remember?
First year of who?
That we played at your show, at your club.
I don't know.
You know,
2?
80, no, it was
86-ish.
85.
It was the year you guys were getting paid $37 plus 4 hot dogs.
And Chris Williamson took $37. And we didn't eat the hot dogs. But, you know, the time where promoters actually loved the music, like Randy, and put their whole life on the line,
Yeah.
and it wasn't about the money, it wasn't this corporate rock bullshit that you see now at clubs. You know, who's the big promoter now? You gotta be fucking
Live Nation.
yeah, Live Nation and all this. I mean, there's no place, and I always say that, like I do these walking tours on the Lower East Side. I mean, I was going to CB's in 77 and Max's, the whole 9 yards. But I always say there was always places for young bands to play, to get gigs. Like, and nowadays with Live Nation and the rest of the shit, where it's just about the buck, it's, you know, promoters like Randy are just, I mean, we may come across a few of them here and there in our travels, but, you know, this dude, keeping that club open was just, you know, an amazing task. And I remember, I just want to say one more thing. The first time we were, like, they said, yo, you guys are going to go to Trenton and play City Gardens. I was like, what? I was like, who the fuck wants to go to, you know, to Trenton to play? But it was like, you know, you had the whole East Coast, right. It was Philly, you know, New York, Boston. But, like, we've seen Cro-Mags shows, we've seen some of the most insane pits and audiences, and, like, the night, I think the first night we played there was packed, and there was this huge fight and just insanity on the dance floor, and nobody sued. People got their fucking jaws broke. Nobody sued, and it's really, you know, kind of a letdown
He
nowadays.
still got hurt to see.
Yeah, it was cool. People would be like, oh, I got 3 of my teeth knocked out. It was a great night. You know, now it's like, you know, you're getting letters from fucking lawyers and stuff.
You know, you mentioned Live Nation. I just wrote this on my Facebook for my store in Boardtown. I wrote about, not only is it Live Nation owns the building, the Stone Pony, and the Wonder Bar, and the, what's the other club down there? Not the Asbury Lanes, but they own the building. And then if you want to buy a ticket to a show, you got to buy it from Ticketmaster, and Live Nation owns Ticketmaster. I wanted to buy a ticket to see Dean Lean's band coming up. It was $16 for the show and $11 for the Ticketmaster charge. And I blew my stack, if anybody reads, I don't know if you saw it, Rich, yeah. And also, I still do $5 shows every week in my store. If you want to follow me. Lady Mac just played for me 2 weeks ago. She drove from New York, played for $5 in front of, you know, we hold like 30 people, about 25 people showed up. And we're still, I have the Dolly Rots coming for $8. That's pretty cheap, that's September 10th. I have Brute Force coming, if anybody knows who Brute Force is, he was on Apple Records. He wrote a song called The King of Pho. It's the only song to be banned for obscenity like this, and he never utters an obscenity. The song is called The King of Pho. It's about the king of a country called Pho. So he is the Pho King. He never says fucking, and he says Pho King. And it was banned, and George Harrison and John Lennon picked up on it, and they released it on Apple. And copies of the 45 go for $8,000 right now. And George Harrison actually had the London Symphony put strings into the song. If you want to see a really cool, artist, Brute Force is playing for me for $12.
Still a promoter.
Yeah, right, I'm still moving. For 5 hours, you can come down this Saturday night. I have no cover. We're going to be doing a 60s garage dance.
I got a question. Randy, did you ever actually get sued and have any horrible outcomings from being sued? No.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I mean, everybody got paid off. We went to court a few times. One of the worst cases, I just told this, I just did for the book also, that goes with, not with the film, but it goes with the club, which is no slam dancing, no stage diving, no spikes. I was at Cherry Hill Library, another little plug there. And I was telling a story about a guy who escaped from the Trenton Psychiatric Ward. And, this show, the dance was going, it was a DJ dance. And these people started coming up, they were sitting on the bar stools, they were saying, my ass is on fire, my ass is on fire. And like, the first one that said it was like, you're full of shit, and you're high or whatever. Then the second, do you remember the story? Yeah. And then the DJ booth used to be over top of the ladies' room at the front door there. And I heard, girls like screaming or whatever. I just thought maybe at first it was like 2 girls talking loud, telling a joke, or maybe there was a little cat fight. But it got worse and worse. It turned out that this guy that escaped from the psych ward grabbed a pool stick from the pool table in the back, which made us go to the pool table, and he was banging her over the head, and she was doing that and broke all her knuckles. That was the first big lawsuit, and that's when the local media kind of got a hold of, hey, what's going on in this club here? Weird shit's going on.
You got sued for that?
Oh God, yeah.
The hot seat
What was it?
acid, right? Wasn't acid on
Battery acid, yeah.
What was the outcome of that lawsuit?
Oh, she got millions. It made our policy go from maybe $25,000 a year to $75,000 a year liability, and that's a lot.
You think?
I mean, I could go all day long with stories, actually.
I got a question from this guy here.
Yeah, has the name actually been incorporated? Has the name City Gardens been incorporated? Somebody owns that, like CBGB's?
Steve?
No, I don't think it is actually.
I own it.
I think you'd do it tomorrow morning.
I think
Tut owns it. I think
Tut owns it.
Yeah.
Wow,
I know the logo. They never.
I don't know that.
really?
Randy, when we tried to do a City Gardens reunion thing, he wouldn't let us use the name City Gardens unless we paid him for that. The one time we did a reunion.
Right, yeah, I remember I did a reunion, and he called me up, how dare you call it a City Gardens reunion?
You should try calling it the Madison City Gardens.
And you notice the owner of the club, he went by Frank Wertzhut, you heard that a lot of times go back and forth. He refused to be involved with anything with the film or with the book, and he doesn't talk about it at all.
Why?
He never made T-shirts, and I'm afraid to make T-shirts, to be honest with you. I know right away, if I see them out there, I bought some on eBay. But if I were to do it, he'd come right down on me,
Man, it's
so
such a great era.
I stay clear of it.
Maybe you could make T-shirts and have all the money go to a certain charity, and he'd look like a real asshole if he sued you for that one.
Send it to Gibby.
But a new guy bought the club.
I have a question for Sim. Sim played in the Rollins band, and Henry Rollins was in the movie a lot, and he seemed rather wistful at the end, saying he wishes he could go back there one more time, but I've read his books, especially Get in the Van, and he hated everything about every place he ever went to. Was he being honest? Do you get the sense that he had a actual passion for the club, or was he just playing with the camera?
Henry's a pretty sentimental guy. It's his home. Can you hear me? He's a pretty sentimental guy.
Closer.
Oh, closer. And he's a documenter, and he's a collector of things. So yeah, he was being very honest about
Do you wish you could go back there one more time?
that. I do actually. I found the footage of the dusty city gardens, some of the most compelling stuff that I saw in the film. Would like to see more, and it made me want to check it out. It's funny. I saw a picture of like an empty CBGB's. There's a pretty iconic photo of that, and you could smell it. you know, just by looking at it. And, well, it was a pretty rank place. But I had the same feeling about City Gardens. There was just a lot of great stuff that I found.
We have a question here.
I don't really have a question. I just want to say that I go to the Mill Hill Basement a lot down in Trenton, and they love you. And I think that you have instilled in them so much to have great punk bands there, great local bands. Dave Locaine, Greg Pine has all kinds, like, he looks up to you so much. And there's great promos happening in Trenton. And I tell you, I'd rather go to see a show in Trenton than a show in Manhattan.
Yeah!
And that's totally serious.
Greg's a good guy.
You got a question?
Yeah, so for Steve, I mean, amazing seeing the final product of it all.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And Randy, obviously, you know, you're always back. Tell me about the process of. There was a lot. You had pictures of the clubs, all the bands, all the musicians. You know,
Yep.
how did you figure it all out? Scheduling. How did you decide what to use, what not to use?
It was different for me because I didn't have this really understanding of what the club's history was. So I didn't know Randy was a big player in the club's history. Someone actually said, "You got to talk to this guy, Randy." I remember his name. I just didn't know the role and stuff. So because of that, it was quite good, I think, to make the film for myself because I wasn't really going to be forcing a lot into the film. Everybody else sort of told the story, so that's kind of what they said. If they were going to say, well, Randy did this, or the club was mainly this in its history, it would have went that way. But it had all these sort of, had this sort of timeline to it. So going back and finding that stuff was where it got more complicated. Luckily, guys like Randy and Henry and Ian and Jello have this recall that is pretty amazing. So they can pull back dates and they can remember bands that no one remembered, like, oh, they opened and it was a bad night. So it's, people have still remembered all this stuff and kept a lot. Like Randy had a ton of sort of memorabilia and his friends did because they loved the club a lot. So it really started to fall into place, like what I needed to do. But a big thing was, who could be here tonight, was Ken Salerno, who took a lot of the photography in the film because we had no footage. The footage was really bad. It was like YouTube quality stuff. Because back then, a video camera was really expensive and you couldn't walk in with like a suitcase on your shoulder. So there wasn't much of that. So we had to kind of just lean on the photography a lot. So that, with him and I think the players that we were talking to that were there a lot, really sort of helped me sort of map it out. But it kind of just...
Also, on that, a lot of the bands back then would say no cameras, no video,
Yeah.
and they probably all kick themselves in the ass right now. Why did we say that? I'd like to see that now.
And how you doing? Good to see you. We the other thing was that the stories that are in the film. This is really a pamphlet of the place's history, but it's what people talked about and remembered. So we sort of couldn't get away from certain things. So that's what translated. And what was kind of great is a lot of musicians like Henry Rollins and Ian Mackay and even the local bands and stuff like usually asked kind of the same stuff. Tell me about hardcore. Tell me about this or that. And recalling some night that they might have found hilarious was actually really, I think a great experience. They seemed to enjoy it a lot. So it was kind of sort of walking back in history. So it was good. It was a good time interviewing everybody too.
Randy? I have a question for Howie Abrams, who's a record exec and ran In Effect Records and Relativity Records. And by going to City Gardens and by putting yourself in the danger of leaving the comfy confines of New York City and going to see a band in Trenton, do you think that ever gave you a leg up in being able to sign a band because they were like, wow, this guy likes us enough to come to this fucking shithole town and see us?
No, that's not how it works. But good question. Actually, what it was is that I was going to the club for a few years before I had a label at all. I wasn't really working with bands until about 1988. But I was going to City Gardens probably starting about 1984, 1985 when I got my driver's license at 16. So basically, the bands that I was working with were all pretty much New York-based or tri-state area-based bands, but they would go and play City Gardens. So one of the things that was great about City Gardens is, New York, we were pretty spoiled. You had CBGBs, you had the Ritz around the corner, you know, earlier the Rock Hotel, and Gildersleeve's Peppermint Lounge, all that stuff. So there were always clubs, but there weren't always clubs for these bands. And so, you know, there was the New York, Philly, Boston, you know, circuit that all these bands would play. And then you'd start to hear about this club in Trenton called City Gardens that would actually book these types of bands too. So eventually I was like, wow, they want to book these bands that I work with. That's pretty amazing. So I was like, okay, I could drive now. I'm going to go to Trenton, New Jersey, not knowing it was the fucking armpit of the universe. And I get to Calhoun Street. You know, no punk, hardcore, any club was in a nice neighborhood. That was said in the film too. It was always in a shithole. And this was a shithole. But there was an energy in that place. And, you know, you could feel that there was a community in that building that had been built by the kids that go there, and unbeknownst to me at the time, by somebody like Randy, whose heart and soul is what made that place tick and brought those bands there. And, you know, it was almost like, wow, there's people outside of New York City that like this stuff too. And you'd go there, and it was a real club, and it was a big club, and there were people that would answer your questions if you had them, and there was a PA, and, you know, it was a real joint. So what it was the growth of this kind of music, that there were places popping up that were recognizing it and becoming accepting of it, which not everybody was. And, you know, there was a lot of lumps that he took for booking these types of bands, as Randy, you know, pointed out so eloquently. So it wasn't so much going there to sign bands, but the fact that there were other places to go for these bands. And you didn't just have to go to a big city, that you could stop off between Philly and New York in a place like Trenton, and it was this awesome place to play where kids loved going and really loved the bands, and you know, I attribute a lot of its success obviously to Randy. But one thing I also wanted to say is, I think Steve Tozzi, this is the first time I got to see the film, did a fucking fantastic job with this film. Anytime I saw the Butthole Surfers, they scared the fucking shit out of me.
Well, that's really, okay, one last question on someone who's gonna use the microphone. Sorry.
I used to sell badges, pins at City Gardens at the shows. And it was great because, you know, my stand at the Ritz, I was downstairs and I wouldn't see the band, so I could go to City Gardens and I would be able to see the bands. But in fact, I used to spend all my time when the band was playing in the back room playing the pinball machine, because that was just like, that was my entertainment down there. Randy used to put me up. Were you in a trailer?
I had a trailer for a while.
He was in a trailer?
The house that you saw in the film, every Sunday, Jolly would wind up with me. I'd have to take him to the farmhouse with me, and then we would go to a place. I'm losing my voice. We used to go to Olga's Kitchen. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
in the mall?
you turned me on to it.
And then I'd take him to the train station. That went on for probably 3 years.
I used to have like a race, right? I'd have to stay at Randy's, or I'd have to like race home halfway through the set as a major band. One of the bouncers would like run me down to the station. You know, and they asked to shoot me for the film, and I said, well, really, I don't have anything to say, you know, because I just know what to say. But there's a thing which I always say generally, which is that promoters are the salt of the earth. Without promoters, nothing happens. You can have bands, but it takes, you know, someone like him and who puts together, you know, turns shows into a scene, you know, over a period of time. You know, it's like gardening, it's like cultivating. It's a great work that he does. And there was just one thing that came to me while the film was on, when you mentioned that Sinead O'Connor and her first show, and I remember that's the one that I do remember with her cowl on, and she came up to the pin stand and she bought a pin, which was the fuck off pin.
I haven't seen Jolly in 20 years. Good to see you, man. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Love you.
Okay. Great film. I loved it.
So, Randy, do you have any closing comments before we go?
It's funny, as I watched this film and we were outside, a gentleman from a band called the Blisters, is he still here? He's back here. He said to me, you gave me the chance to open for who, the Pixies?
Yes.
Pixies. They said I promised him $20.
You gonna pay up?
But when he walked off the stage, I guess he put on a great show, and I mean, I would tell you, like Roger said in the film, I would say, tweak this or try that. I hugged him and said, you were so fucking great, I'm gonna give you all the money in my pocket, and he said it was $110. So I'm learning from this film that I think I was pretty goddamn fair to local bands. The thing is, there's 5,000 bands, and maybe I gave 500 a shot, so there's still 4,500 people that hate my guts. But 500 like me, So I also, when Shelter used to play, back in the 60s, I was pretty heavy into the Hare Krishna thing because of the Beatles, and I remember buying the Back to Godhead magazines, and my mom wanted to put me in a military school, because she thought I was crazy doing this Govinda Jaya Jaya thing, Hare Krishna. But when Shelter would come to play, Ray and what's the guitar player, John? Joe. And I would say, here, the guarantee is $500, but here's $1,000. Put $500 into the temple. I did stuff like that a lot.
Good karma.
Good karma, yeah. I hope it works to fix my needs. A lot of people say, I'm going to buy city. It's just like some crazy guy says, I'm going to make a film or I'm going to write a book. I get calls, I'm going to buy City Gardens and we're going to open up again and you're going to book it. Yeah. It would never work. It would never work again. First of all, we're all 40s, 50s. I'm 58. We have kids. We have grandkids. Oh, I can't stay out that late at night anymore. It's not going to work. You're all liars. You're going to say, oh, I'll be there. Yeah. Right, you'll be there. You won't be there. Oh my God.
Those are pills that keep you out late at night, I think.
Charlie, how are you, man? Okay?
I'm good.
Yeah, good to see you. You have to come down.
There was another thing I thought, was just that also in the movie that you mentioned that when you did that first show, that it was Ian Copeland who gave you the band, and I think one has to give him credit that you wouldn't have been able to do City Gardens without Ian Copeland and Frontier Booking bringing you that first wave of British bands and everything.
I remember the first time I went up into Ian Copeland's office. Ian Copeland's the brother of Miles Copeland at the police, Stuart Copeland, and Miles Copeland was the manager of the police and all the other IRS label things. But I remember it was on the 604 Broadway. I remember it was the whole sixth floor, and it opened up. There was a pinball machine, and there was a girl sitting at a desk, like a high school desk, answering phones. And I said, I'm Randy Ellis. I'm supposed to see Ian. It was Courtney Cox.
Right. He married her.
She married Ian?
Yeah, they got married.
I didn't know they got married. Ian got her first shot in that Bruce Springsteen, Dancing in the Dark, is it? Am I right?
You're right. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. But it was Courtney Cox sitting at this little desk, probably working as an intern, I guess, until she started dating Ian. I know Ian's passed on now.
Yeah.
Ian Copeland,
Wrote a great
if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't, we all wouldn't be here. And if Gibby burned the place down, we all wouldn't be here.
All forgiven. Ooh, well, in closing, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I also want to say, I guess it was by mistake, but I guess in the spirit of City Gardens and keeping ticket prices low, you all know you probably paid $10 to come here. If you bought your ticket online, which most of you did, your ticket service fee was like $1.56. And it's not because there are needs by these corporations to charge you huge amounts of money to come out and be entertained for the night. It's their fucking wants. So think about that next time you're buying a ticket, or a ticket for $13.50 to see a movie in Manhattan. And the last thing I want to say is that I thought it was funny that Ian MacKay was the guy to say he had no relationship with the front door of a club, because he was always Mr. Punk Rock and of the people in $5 show. But these guys are really of the people. That's why you're here at this movie, and that's why we're all going to the Bowery Electric now for free. So if you have any more questions you want to ask, these are the types of guys you can just walk up to them and ask them, and they'll give you their time, because they realize we're all in this together. Nobody's above anybody else, even if you're on stage. That was the essence of fucking punk rock. That was the essence of City Gardens. That's the essence of Randy Fox and Keep Alive. Well, thank you guys all for coming out, and I hope we can all hang out at the Bowery Rec.